It is no secret, as you've already heard, that today Texas education is at a critical juncture. The teacher pipeline is dwindling. Far too many classrooms that are full of students lack well-prepared teachers, and student learning needs are greater than ever. Ensuring that we have adequate numbers of teachers being prepared and that those teachers are effectively prepared to immediately meet the needs of students is not a luxury, it's an imperative. Keeping those well-prepared teachers in classrooms is also a key challenge in need of a solution. In an effort to address these concerns, Sam Houston State University made a thoughtful and deliberate change several years ago to move to year-long residency in lieu of traditional student teaching. We piloted this effort with 2 cohorts of teacher candidates and 2 school districts in 2018, expanded in 2019, and moved fully to scale with our residency program at the EC6 and 4 through 8 levels in 2021. We continue to move our secondary program towards scale, which admittedly includes its own set of unique challenges. The residency model, without exception, allows our teacher candidates at every level to be more fully prepared to serve the needs of PK-12 students in immediate and meaningful ways. The residency model allows candidates more time in classrooms, gaining valuable practice and experience in the role of teacher, experience that is irreplaceable with other types of models. Our model also provides substantial mentoring and support from multiple sources, including the school, the district, as well as us, the university EPP. This level of engagement and on-the-ground experience and support are too often a missing component of preparation processes, regardless of the preparation pathway. We offer residency models for both fall-spring and spring-fall teacher candidates so that the path and timeline to graduation for candidates are not interrupted. The year-long residency process ensures that candidates have the full range of teacher experiences, regardless of which semester they plan to graduate or complete their program, thus avoiding critical gaps in their experiential preparation. When we began this process, we believed in the model and what we thought it could do for our teacher candidates. And frankly, we were right. Our teacher retention rate at SHSU is consistently among the highest in the state. Last year, our 5-year teacher retention rate for SHSU graduates was 78%, compared to 66.4% average rate for university-based teacher programs in Texas, which are the highest, and a statewide average overall of just 58.5%. Our residency graduates, however, paint an even brighter picture. Though we do not have 5-year rates yet, our teacher residents have a 2-year retention rate of 91%, a 3-year rate of 86%, and a 4-year rate of 86%. That trend exceeds all other models of any kind statewide. In addition to these data, it was truly our teacher candidates and our school district partners who convinced us to invest in moving from pilot to scale. Their voices left no doubt. Our choice to begin with 2 pilot cohorts meant that these teacher candidates had longer hours, more days in schools, and higher expectations than their peers. Yet they came back after that experience and raved about how prepared they felt, how valuable that experience was, and how next level ready they were to be certified teachers in classrooms. Our district partners provided and still provide that same feedback. They compare these candidates to second-year teachers, not entry level, because they are so much better prepared for the actual job of teaching. And they consistently ask for as many teacher candidates as we can provide and seek competitive advantages to attract our candidates to their schools. The stories are consistent and uplifting, and frankly, they speak for themselves. We recognize the challenges associated with residency implementation, and we also recognize from firsthand experience that residency works. It develops better prepared teachers, it builds stronger partnerships between EPPs and school districts, and most importantly, it ultimately has a positive impact on PK-12 students. Whatever challenges exist are solvable problems for which we are diligently working to find sustainable solutions. Statewide support for development of these models, similar to HB 11 from the previous session, are necessary and important. Opportunities for teacher candidates to have paid residency experiences are also critical to ensuring that candidates can afford to have the preparation needed to become effective day one ready teachers. We cannot afford for the literal cost of becoming a well-prepared teacher to be an inhibiting factor. As the 4th largest university-based program in Texas, implementing and supporting residency has been no small feat. This semester alone, we have 215 year-long residents in full-time placements serving 26 school districts on 116 campuses and impacting thousands of PK-12 children. We ensure that our residency opportunities are appropriate for meeting the diverse needs of Texas schools, both large and small. We likewise ensure that our model is effective across all types of districts, and that includes robust partnerships not just with our large urban and suburban districts, but also with our rural partners as well. The investment of time and resources is immense, but so is the return on this investment. Our children, all children, in every classroom, in every school, deserve the very best and most prepared teachers possible.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Buckley, esteemed committee members, thank you for the opportunity to come before you to speak today. My name is Dr. Josh Jones, and I'm the Director of Educator Preparation Services at Tarleton State University. Prior to coming to Tarleton, I spent 18 years as a science educator and basketball coach, and 3 years as a high school administrator, all in Texas public schools. More importantly, I'm the father of 2 recent high school graduates, with another to graduate in 2 years. This is my background, which makes it vital that I express my desire to help our great state by producing more teacher candidates prepared through rigorous, high-quality programs, culminating with a year-long residency placement. According to a 2024 study published by Dr. Jacob Kirksey, who we heard from earlier today, 45% of new hires in the state of Texas entered the classroom with no certification. In certain rural areas of the state, that number was as high as 80%. 72% of these uncertified new hires had no prior experience in Texas public schools. These uncertified, inexperienced hires lead to disastrous results in our school-aged children, with these students experiencing learning losses of approximately 4 months in reading and 3 months in math when compared to students with a certified educator in the classroom. In 2019, Tarleton recognized that our educator preparation program had grown stagnant. Results from the TPI US inspection indicated that our program was not producing teacher candidates with the overall quality we knew the students in Texas deserved. We began to identify potential pathways to increase the quality of candidate produced by our program, and we introduced by our friends at Sam Houston State and others to the concept of the year-long residency. In this pathway, Tarleton students would spend a full year with a master teacher in a partner district classroom, participate in a co-teaching experience culminating certification. Of the 24 students who participated in our pilot cohort, which began 5 years ago this week, 23 are still working as a teacher of record in Texas public school. The one who is not has taken a leave from teaching to raise a family. Data from anonymous postgraduate survey shows that candidates produced in our residency model are prepared to be educators. 89% of Tarleton residents state that they are well prepared, with 98% saying they feel confident to teach on day one. It is my belief that Texas is in the throes of a teacher retention crisis, largely based upon the method through which candidates are prepared. Nationwide data taken from a 2016 Learning Policy Institute study demonstrates that anywhere from 80% to 95% of candidates prepared through a year-long residency program are still in the field after 3 years, rates 10 to 24% higher than non-certified candidates. A 2024 EPIC study of Texas candidates showed that 90% of candidates prepared by a residency model remained in the field after 3 years, 6 percentage points higher than candidates prepared in traditional university programs and 11 points higher than alternative certification candidates. Candidates produced by residency programs are also more likely to choose to teach in schools with higher rates of economically disadvantaged and educationally at-risk students than their peers. What this data tells us that if more universities were utilizing residency programs in their educator preparation, Texas schools will need to hire fewer and fewer non-certified educators. As retention rates increase, the need for non-certified educators would decrease. This increase in residency programs will lead to greater numbers of educators prepared through this high-quality pathway, allowing school districts to spend less funding on recruitment and hiring and more dollars on working with students. More highly qualified educators in Texas classroom will also positively impact student educational outcomes and help Texas by providing a better educated workforce. One of the most significant changes that Tarleton has made in its move to the year-long residency is the strength of its partnerships with partner districts. Earlier this year, Tarleton completed the requirements to become a federally recognized apprenticeship program, one of 4 universities, again, alongside our colleagues from SAM, to earn this designation. We are partnering with Fort Worth ISD and their 75,000 students to pilot this program, in which we will help their paraprofessionals and classroom aides complete their degree requirements and become teachers of record in the community where they live and work. We believe that we can increase the supply of teachers in classrooms by continuing to hold fast to our preparation. We will educate paraprofessionals and classroom aides to complete their journey to a bachelor's degree and a Texas teaching certificate through a high-quality year-long residency experience. Now, while data is important, we must all remember that at the heart of this discussion are the school children of our state. Please let me read you this email I received from a recent graduate of our program. I received this in April of this year. Good evening, Dr. Jones. My name is Callie Mathis, and I graduated from the Tarleton Education Program in December of 2022. I've been meaning to email you for a few months now, but I just wanted to reach out and let you know how thankful I am for the Tarleton Education Program. I've recently come across several teachers who recently graduated from different schools or programs, and I'm realizing how well prepared we were through Tarleton. I won't lie, all the work and high expectations seemed unachievable at times, but I cannot even express how grateful I am for being pushed to be the very best. I truly believe that Tarleton produces the best and well-prepared teachers out there. Please don't change how you run your program. Keep standards and expectations high. Keep expecting for all those exams to be taken and passed before graduation. It was also worth it. Thank you again for setting me up for program success, and thank you to all of my professors throughout the program. Callie Mathis, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you.
Well, thank you both for your testimony. We'll go to questions now. Members, any questions for this panel? I'll let y'all begin. I do. Sorry. Okay, so when you talk about your residency program, just give me an idea. So you find a partner district. What is sort of the vetting process? So I would imagine, is that done on your end or on the district's end? Do they make a proposal? We want to put a teacher in this class, that class, this subject area. How does that work?
Sure. The vetting process is two-way. So we do have partner districts. We reach out to them, we vet them, and then we let them know these are the candidates we have, these are their certification areas, this is what we're looking for. And then we work collectively with them in terms of finding the appropriate classroom with the appropriate mentor teacher for them to be in that school. For both of you, now I get the Stephenville to Fort Worth deal, but what's the greatest distance? I'm trying to think of Texas in general. Sure.
Some of us have little districts and others have to drive to Oklahoma to go home tonight.
Absolutely.
But nearly.
Yeah.
But
and
I'm just
for
saying,
us-
so tell me what's the sort of the geography of it?
Sure, absolutely. And that's an important question because year-long residency is a greater lift than a single semester student teaching, because now those candidates are going every day for 2 semesters, not 1 semester. For us, our main campus is in Huntsville, but 75% of our teacher candidates are from the greater Houston area.
Mm-hmm.
So some of our largest partners, Conroe ISD, Klein ISD, Aldine, Spring, that general area, we send them to Cy-Fair, almost any urban district and suburban school district across Texas. So we do have candidates that are driving, 35, 40, 45 minutes.
Is that because of the academic requirements back at the university? I mean, is that ongoing? I know when we talked to the public school folks a minute ago from Clint that they're taking courses and at the same time. Is that the same way your program
Sure.
works?
The first,
Or are they purely practical?
Here, but the first semester, yes, they are still they're finishing coursework. Their first semester of residency, second semester, for us, our model is they are full-time, all day, every day in the school district.
And our model is slightly different than that. Our students, for each semester, will be four days a week in their clinical placement with the districts, and then 1 day a week they come back to the university to complete coursework. In the fall, much like what Sam Houston State does, we have students that either they begin their residency in the fall or they may begin their residency in the spring semester, just based upon where they are for their graduation plans. For their first semester, they're taking anywhere from 12 to 15 hours in addition to their 4 days a week in the schools, and then they're taking 9 hours in the spring semester. So our students are, they're not just learning in their partner classrooms. They're still learning in coursework, but we've been very intentional with our curriculum to ensure that our curriculum that they're learning during these 2 semesters directly correlates to what they are seeing in the classroom. We also have a course called Seminar. Essentially, it's a student teaching course, and in that course, the individuals who teach that collect data from the field that's being seen from the university supervisors, from the mentor teachers, from the campus principals, and then they take that data and they immediately address those particular issues that may be occurring in the field when they come back on each week. So instead of, I've got to, I'm going to address classroom management in, week 9 of the semester, we can address it the very week that it's occurring in the classroom.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So if you were to, like in your letter, which is or your email from your former student, which is very, very, very impressive. And you can be brief, but what are those high bars? What are those high standards you think that's set of your program that's
one of the things
that made her say that?
Certainly. So one of the things that we have 3 different sets of gateways that we have in place for our residents. One of them is their performance. The evaluative tool that we use is the T-test rubric, which is used by the overwhelming majority of districts in the state for their evaluations. Now, whereas that one goes from, the T-test rubric goes from needs improvement all the way up through distinguished, we only mark our students either as needs improvement, developing, or proficient. In the first semester, they've got to be developing in each of the domains, or excuse me, the dimensions in the T-tests on one of their formal evaluations, and then by graduation, they must be proficient in each of those in order to be graduating. So that's the performance. The second one is their testing. We want our students to graduate certified. In our pilot program, we required them to take the exam before they began, but that's the only requirement that we had. And what we discovered is we had several students who maybe were unsuccessful on that first attempt, and it's very easy because of everything. I'm in the classroom 4 days a week, I'm working with students, I'm still going back to the university and completing coursework. It's very easy for that certification exam to slip to the back of their mind. And then, I'm 2 weeks from graduation, I haven't passed my CERT exam yet. I haven't studied for my CERT exam since I took it the first time. And the pressure and all that and so what we discovered is we have to help them keep it to the front of their mind. And so we have a test by date, and then we have retest dates set throughout the semester where they have to, again, if they're unsuccessful on the first attempt, they have, 60 days to do remediation with professors and then retest again. And that gives them multiple opportunities to take that pass. And, and unfortunately, we do have students that get caught up in that who are unsuccessful. And if they're unsuccessful, then, they're not allowed to go on and continue on. Now, we have some remediation that we do, and then we, work with them, and then, they'll finish another semester, but it's possible their graduation could be delayed. And then the final one is our professionalism, just ensuring that all of our educators are, performing according to and holding to the, the code of ethics, which all of us are held accountable for. And, on occasion, we do have students who, don't need to be in the classroom. And to be perfectly honest with you, part of my role in this position is to produce the absolute best students I possibly can for the state of Texas. But it's also my responsibility to prevent people who do not need to be working with children from getting into classrooms. That's part of my role. And it's unfortunate, but again, I'm a dad. Yeah. And, there's certain people that I wouldn't want teaching my kid.
Yeah.
So.
I get you.
Add
Yeah, Dr.
please.
Edmondson, yeah.
Sure.
If you might kind of share your some specific individual things about your program that sort of tag onto that, and let us hear a little bit about how y'all do
Sure,
it.
absolutely. And very similar, we have gateways and different things, benchmarks along the way, similar to Charlton. A couple of distinguishing things as well. Residency is their final clinical experience, the year-long residency. They've had early field experience, early clinical experiences throughout their program before that, scaffolded over time. So the first semester, first of all, they have to be admitted into educator preparation. So there's a lot of academic and GPA and readiness components I could talk about, but those are separate from this conversation. But they have to have a minimum GPA to be admitted into educator preparation. Just because they chose to major in education doesn't automatically get them in to the program. So that is a gateway early in the process. And And once they're admitted, then they can begin, and they pass their background check, then they can begin field experiences. And we do scaffold those over time. In terms of first semester, they're in the field, they're observing, they're teaching group lessons, things like that. The next semester, they're teaching individual lessons, being responsible for multiple levels of instruction at different phases like that. One of the things that I would add in addition to what Tarleton mentioned is in that year-long residency process, their expectations for governance as well. So there are regular meetings of the teacher candidate with our cooperating supervisor, with their mentor teacher, with the campus administration to really sit down and talk about what does their performance look like, what impact are they having on children, how do we know, where are growth areas, where are improvement areas, things like that. So there really are very meaningful processes built in other than I show up and I teach all day.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Members, any more questions for this panel? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Chair calls Diane Huber, Pam Wetherington, and Scott Rozelle. I show you registered as Diane Huber, founder of iTeach, and you'll be testifying today.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. I show you registered as Pam Wetherington, Executive Director, Teach Us Texas. You'll be testifying today. And I show you registered as Scott Rozelle, 240 Tutoring, and you'll be testifying today.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. We'll say good afternoon, Chairman Buckley and committee members. I'm Dr. Diane Huber. I'm the founder of iTeach, which is a state and nationally accredited alternative route to teacher preparation. I would like to share my specific perspective on how the exemption from certification requirements in districts of innovation harm teacher candidates and in turn negatively impact our teaching profession. With the creation of DOIs in 2015, iTeach attempted to monitor the growth of non-licensed teachers, specifically those in iTeach. And this is not an easy task. In 2022-23, iTeach identified 250 of our candidates who were teaching in DOIs. In 2023-24, that number grew to 478. This is over 700 candidates in our program that were hired by DOIs to be teacher of record. The majority of those individuals will not return for certification. We are only able to collect the data by working with our partner districts, asking the HR department to give us a list of their hired DOI candidates, and an iTeach staff member literally goes through one by one to identify the candidates in our program so that we can reach out to them. Why in the world would we go to such a labor-intensive effort? It's because over the last 20 years, iTeach is committed to supporting these candidates and keeping them on the pathway to certification. Weekly, if not daily, I get an email from a candidate in the program saying, I am leaving the profession. I am frustrated. I am disillusioned. I am lonely. I speak with them personally and ask them to stay, continue your coursework, complete your testing, let us work with you. But the negative impact overrides my words. One specific action we believe would help is to allow teacher preparation programs the authority to observe uncertified candidates in the classroom. Now, technically, there is nothing in law that prevents iTeach from observing and supporting these DOI teachers under current rule. However, the observation of a non-licensed teacher cannot be used in the state formal observation requirements. We would like to change that rule. We would like to be able to observe our candidates who are in the classroom teaching, let them pass the test, and let us support them. Please note that we provided Mr. Reed and the committee the language we would advocate for this. And it was in an amendment proposed by Representative Hefner during the fourth call session, and we really appreciated his work and effort on this. With my remaining time, I would like to share with you a note of an unintended consequence of teaching without a certificate that arrived in my inbox recently. I was copied on an email from a state superintendent to the misconduct reporting portal at TEA, informing TEA and iTeach that an iTeach candidate had been placed on administrative leave due to physical abuse of a student. I reviewed the video that was linked in the email, and I saw a male PE teacher in a gym holding a basketball, talking to students, when he reared back with that ball in his hand and threw it in the face of a middle schooler. Let me be perfectly clear. We did not know this individual was in a classroom. We had no idea. iTeach conducted its investigation, and the candidate was released from our program. But because the candidate was not on a certificate, I could not follow state procedures and deactivate that certificate. And without a certificate, TEA cannot do an investigation. Now, to their credit, I visited with TEA staff and board members, and they were alarmed and surprised by this activity, especially that a certificate could not be sanctioned. I come before you today to ask that you allow a certificate or a record for an individual who is teaching, because as we speak here today, that candidate on administrative leave left our program, went to another program, and could be in a classroom teaching as we sit here talking. Please allow educator preparation programs the ability to work with, monitor, and observe candidates while they work in a DOI. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Pam Wetherington.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Dr. Pam Wetherington. I'm the Executive Director of Educator Preparation and Certification for Teach Us Texas. Our program was primarily a face-to-face program, alternative certification program, but pivoted after COVID-19 and to offer a virtual preparation program. Honestly, very honestly, this is a fundamental shift for our staff, as many of us have served as teacher educators in that traditional model, university-based preparation pathway. When we designed our online program, teaching and learning model, we were very intentional to include those very same highly effective preparation practices and support methods that we know and we knew then, based on our experiences, improved teacher performance. But when we hit go, we quickly learned that there were circumstances that we had not accounted for, which I'm going to share with you. A little bit about our program first, though, I think, just building some context. Our program is organized into 4 blocks. We'll call them segments. And it is reasonable to believe that a teacher candidate following that certification pathway could complete their pre-internship prior to getting on an intern certificate in about 4 months. This is very much largely dependent upon the candidate's goal to pursue teacher certification and whether or not the district in which they are serving does require a certification. And then just a little side note, as of yesterday afternoon, I looked and we're up to 362 teacher candidates across the state of Texas. Pretty exciting for a pretty small program that has grown to scale across the state. What we know to be true about educator preparation is that there is long-standing research, and you've heard a lot about that today, that has consistently pointed to and continues to point to that the transformative power of high-quality preparation. High-quality preparation, like we've also heard today, is not easy and really should not be. It just isn't about checking those boxes to get certified. It is about perseverance and true grit. To learn about, conceptualize, practice, reflect, receive feedback, and use that feedback on what it means to be a dedicated, effective, resilient, responsive, student-centered, very knowledgeable educator. What we have learned through this process is that the majority of our candidates are serving as teachers of record in a school as a non-certified teacher, much like you've heard today. Frankly, this was a little bit of a step back for us, a little bit of a shock. 1/3 we're learning of our candidates are actively engaged in coursework, actively pursuing that certification. That means that 2/3 of them are kind of hanging out. And so the math you can do, that's also a little bit staggering. So if 2/3 of them are not active and are holding a teacher of record position, this means they have little to no preparation, that coaching and that support, those moves that we know that really are those difference makers in affecting teacher retention and student achievement. Non-certified teachers, another thing that we're learning is that they have those same benefits as certified teachers. So that salary, that step up in pay, that building that teacher retirement. And because of those really lovely incentives, this then prompts a limited motivation to actively engage in the preparation program. We're also learning that districts, particularly rural districts, in which there's a little bit more challenging to fill those teacher vacancies, are having to retract some of their stakes in the ground. And we heard that earlier about the 3-year you must get certified by. We're learning in some of the rural school districts that they will retract that statement because they know they need that teacher the following year. Some of the things that we have done that are within our locus of control, because we know that we are part of this experience too, and so we want to do what we can to then help mitigate some of the things that we're noticing. We have redesigned our coursework to ensure a more authentic learner, teacher, candidate experience. Our instructors nudge consistently if a candidate is not engaged in 7 or more days, and they continue to follow up with them. We also offer bi-weekly office hours that candidates can engage in. We hired a staff member who works directly with candidates who need some additional support in passing their content pedagogy exams by offering one-on-one tutoring and personalized learning plans. We've also implemented academic advising so that every candidate is assigned an academic advisor throughout the program to help them outline realistic timelines and keep them on track to meet those timelines to make sure that they become internship eligible and eventually standard certified. And we've also instituted an inactivity protocol and policy. If a candidate's not active for 90 days, we knock on their virtual door a few times, and if no response, we remove them from the program. What we have learned from our actions is that we have invested a significant amount of time, energy, resources, which we are so happy to do. You've heard other people talk about this, if this means positive outcomes for teachers and kids. What we have seen some uptick from those actions in terms of program engagement, but not to the level that we had hoped for. We continue to believe in our mission to provide quality preparation, but in order to continue providing this level of support, we would just ask and request that the legislature consider the following. Make preparation and certification more attractive. I've heard the word attractive multiple times today. Remove those barriers and increase incentives for quality preparation and certification. Provide incentives for candidates to access high-quality preparation, and provide districts with the resources so that they can support and reinforce those incentives to engage in quality preparation. And if the legislator chooses to take action, we are just sitting on go and ready. Thank you all again so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wetherington. Now we'll go to Scott Rozelle.
I wasn't nervous till I sat down, so this is fun. I've been sitting and listening to the testimony for the past 2 days, and it's really encouraging to see y'all so engaged. Chairman Buckley, I don't think you've had a restroom break in 30 hours. So thank y'all so much. Y'all are violating a lot of stereotypes of politicians by listening, trying, engaging. Y'all are trying to get the best information you can to make the best decisions you can about something that's important to the whole state, which is why I'm here. My name is Scott Rozelle. I'm a former teacher. I actually went through an alternative certification program. I teach. And I started a company to help teachers pass their certification test, and I currently own a certification company myself, 240 Certification. I've been in the industry about 15 years, and I've seen a lot of changes. And some of the biggest changes I've seen, as you all know, is there's a lot of uncertified teachers being hired. And no one that I talk to thinks that this is good. Kind of a basic way to think about it, certification is the onboarding for the profession. So just as each member here went through an onboarding about how the House works and Robert's Rules of Orders to allow you to be more effective from day one, certification serves largely the same purpose. It onboards into a very complex profession so that these educators can be effective faster. The longer that they're in the classroom, typically the more effective that they get. I'm sure y'all are much more effective in your 3rd, 4th, 20th term, Representative Dutton, than you were in your first term. It's the same with teachers, and certification just allows them to be more effective faster, which is what we need. And what I would propose is in order to provide a healthier environment for certification of teachers is the parental notification that was referenced quite a few times. That will allow parents to do the exact same thing that this committee does, which is try to get the best information to make the best decision for things that are very important for them. And the great thing about parental notification is that it provides flexibility, it provides transparency. Chairman Buckley, you said there are good and bad teachers in every certification category. The job of this committee is to find ways to put the best teacher in the classroom, and I agree with you. There's fantastic teachers that are very effective that are not certified. They overcome the obstacle of that lack of onboarding. And there's teachers that probably aren't the best teachers that went through traditional programs. With parental notification, it allows parents to understand that they need to ask questions about the qualifications of a teacher in the classroom. A lot of the parents that I speak with, they don't know that they should ask. You saw testimony on here. Even the teachers in the school don't know who and who is not certified. So it's very difficult to be engaged and to be discerning about who's in the classroom when you're not aware of all the information. So the reason I would advocate for parental notification is it maintains flexibility, increases transparency, and allows those closest to the issues to make the best decisions possible. So thank you for your time.
All right, members, questions for this panel? Representative Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to address this to Mr. Rozelle, since you use that word that I've been hearing, onboarding. And I want to ask the question, if you can answer it for me. Is it the hiring practice / onboarding that matters, or is it the certification that matters?
That is a very good question. I'd say it's hard to separate the two. When I talk with district personnel, they are putting out fires all over the place. They have a lot on their plate. The onboarding and the proper procedures and the robustness that is really required for a new teacher in the classroom does, in some aspects, fall on the district. But the state and colleges and certification programs have taken on a large majority of that responsibility to give them a base level knowledge. So the state has defined what makes a qualified educator. So districts, when they get in, ideally, there's at least a common terminology to onboard them to that specific district. You know, the standards of teacher certification are statewide, but the implication for a rural school versus an urban school are very, very different. And so the district does have a distinct responsibility to onboard the teacher into that school, but there is an assumption of prior knowledge provided by the certification program about more baseline, general, universal aspects of the profession.
Good, thank you. Chairman, that's it for me.
All right, Chairman Dutton.
We've talked about the increasing numbers of uncertified teachers being hired by districts. Does that mean that there are certified teachers not being hired?
I don't know.
The answer for that, sir. It's a great question.
Because I'm just wondering if school districts are filling an absolute vacancy or they're hiring non-certified teachers in place of certified teachers.
I think every district in our state would like to be completely staffed with certified teachers. I think that would be the goal. But because due to location or life circumstances, the certified individual is not applying for that position. And so the district I think the district then goes to the individuals in alternative certification programs who are eligible for an intern certificate, which means they've passed their content test, they've demonstrated content mastery, and in the absence, they are hiring uncertified. They're hiring candidates from iTeach who are in our preparation program, but because they haven't passed the content test, they're not eligible for an intern certificate, so they are hired by the district. They're uncertified. And once they get in that position, it is a spiral because they're not prepared for it and they leave the profession. So I think it's because of the lack of options that districts are hiring the uncertified over certified.
And finally, are there things we should do as policymakers to shore this whole thing up so that we increase the number of certified teachers?
Well,
are there things we can do?
I do believe as one request would be to take those uncertified educators and put them on some kind of certificate so that programs can track them, SBEC can track them, monitor if there's discipline problems, but they're in a program. And we have timelines and guide rails that if you're in the classroom, you must be completing your coursework. If you're in the classroom, you must be taking your test and working towards certification. And at the end of the year, we have a certified teacher.
So I guess finally, what I hear you saying is we should do everything we can to, one, increase the number of certified teachers,
Yes.
and number two, do something about helping the uncertified teachers get some sort of license or something.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not sure how we do that. I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, iTeach would like to help the 700 individuals that we have hand identified, but it's very difficult for us to identify them because there's no certificate by which we can track them. So if we take these uncertified teachers, put them on a new certificate, call it whatever, then the state can track, we can encourage so that they move forward and they become the certified teacher.
So classifying them as a certificate of non-certification, what would that help?
The name really doesn't matter, but I think as Scott identified in another testimony said, if you want to go look to see if your child's teacher is certified, they don't even appear on the SBEC search. If they were on a certificate of non-cert, then parents would know and they would show up and it would increase the transparency, as Scott mentioned.
Well, Mr. Chairman, don't we have a rule that a child can't be in with a non-certified teacher for a limited time or something? It seems to me I remember that.
There's do you want to address the parental notification rule? Districts must notify parents if the child is being taught by a non-certified teacher more than 30 days.
That's what I was
But
thinking.
as
That's what I was
testimony
getting
said, over 400 districts have opted out and they don't notify parents.
at. So, and they've opted out because they're a district of innovation? Mm-hmm. So all we would need to do to change that would be to have that applied to a district of innovation
sir.
also.
Yes, sir.
So,
Okay.
and that's where Dr. Overschelt, who testified on panel 2, the ability to search for certifications by school would be extremely helpful. So as Dr. Huber's identifying, if they're not on a certificate, they're not in the system. So it's really hard to find something that doesn't exist. And so just by being able to identify them as some record this person exists and is in the school but doesn't have a valid certificate would go a long way with transparency.
So districts know who's non-certified, but parents don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
So districts know who's non-certified.
Yes, they do.
The HR personnel at a school district should be able to identify which teachers on campus have
And
a
they don't
valid
even tell the other teachers.
No,
No.
no.
Why would they?
And putting them on a certificate would also address, as I said, there is no way for TEA to conduct an investigation on a teacher who has had an interaction with a child unless that individual is on a certificate. There's no way to sanction that individual. There's no way for the next school district to know this happened. But if there was a certificate, it could be sanctioned and others would know of the teacher's activities.
Okay, yeah, I see the problem. I think I understand that we have this in a number of areas. I mean, I remember last session, a member came to me, we were trying to deal with unlicensed homes, and somehow or another, our agencies couldn't deal with them because they were unlicensed, which didn't make a lot of sense either. But then that's kind of almost like TABC, bring your own bottle places don't. TABC doesn't have a whole lot to do with them. And so this is a continuing dysfunction of government when it comes to certain things. And because of the number of increasing number of non-certified teachers, that's what's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, if I may, essentially what a certification allows to do is associate an individual with an object in the government system. And then with that object in the government system to identify actions, behaviors, sanctions, some sort of this is a good or bad actor. But in the absence of that certificate, there's no way to associate this individual in the state system. So the individual that Dr. Huber referenced that took a violent action against a student, without a certificate to track them, there's no way for the next school district to understand the consequences that what it might mean to hire that individual, which is likely to repeat that behavior.
How long can a teacher remain non-certified? Forever?
Well, that's an interesting question. As was testified earlier, some districts have a 3-year limit, but there's no record, and that person can go to the next district and teach their 3 years, but there's no record, and they can go to the next district and teach for 3 years.
So there's no state law requiring a teacher, a person to get a certification by a certain
No.
time?
May I?
Linda?
Oh, sorry. please.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that part of the both and is the certification, that leading towards that is certainly very important. But I'm also thinking about the guardrails that you were talking about. And so what can be done, I'm thinking of like all those support moves that are so critical in preparation. So if the guardrails are even time-bound, but even within that time-bound nature, that they would serve as an uncertified teacher, that there are additional requirements for support mechanisms to be put into place, either district or partnership with the EPP that they're enrolled with. And that could then build towards, to your point, around the certification. I think those, for us, we know what moves the needle in preparation and the teacher performance, which affects on student achievement, is those coaching, that mentorship we've heard so much about today. And so that guardrail to me is so critical, I believe.
And finally, are there any personal reasons why a teacher would get certified who's already working as a non-certified teacher?
We're not seeing, because if Pam is in a room teaching math and I'm next door, she is not in a program. She's getting the same salary. She's getting the same TRS benefits.
Right.
And I teach and I'm doing coursework and I'm doing reflections and I'm doing all this extra. And she's getting exactly what I get. That's why
So
we
what's
have.
the incentive for her? None.
There isn't any.
Well, I think we've heard also a lot about like that efficacy within the profession. Like for me, that grit and that perseverance. So we have many educators that are seeking that, pursuing that pathway because they know that's building something within them for retention purposes, to sustain in this profession, to build back into the profession. But that's a self.
Yes.
That's on self.
Well, that's why we get paid the big money to make all these
That's right.
decisions.
Yes, sir.
And I was just floating around in my head, Mr. Chairman, that suppose you couldn't be in TRS if you remained uncertified for
Yes,
longer
sir.
than 3 years,
Yes, sir.
which would create at least an incentive
Yes.
to get in. I mean, I assume that the people who are choosing to be non-certified want to be certified. I mean, if they don't want to be certified, it won't matter about the incentives or
That's right.
disincentives.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
You know,
Thank you.
Representative Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your participation with us today as we grapple with these very important issues. And I'm confident I speak for all of us on the dais that we want the best in the classrooms. A lot of focus on the word certification. I get it. Are all certified teachers good teachers? No. Are all uncertified teachers bad teachers?
No.
Are there instances where there are uncertified teachers who are better than certified teachers, as other prior witnesses testified to earlier today? Yes,
We
yes,
don't
no.
know because we don't know
Well-
who's
Yeah.
teaching.
I'm just asking, are there any instances
Yes, sir.
where there are uncertified teachers who are better than some certified teachers?
And I think we talked about like that inherent nature, like walking into a classroom, that skill set's already built within. Had a parent that was a teacher, et cetera. But I would love to see the data around that. Like how many of those uncertified that and actually I think there was some data around those highly qualified, those practices we know that's going to move student achievement. So to answer your question, yes. I mean, yes.
Right, so of course, right? In some
Yes, of
instances,
course.
there are uncertified
Yes.
teachers who are better than some certified teachers, which is why I have to ask the question with all due respect when I heard the goal you stated just a minute ago, where you said the goal is or should be, or every ISD, their goal. I can't remember exactly how you articulated who it was, but the goal was to hire only certified teachers. Given y'all's answers to the preceding three questions, I just don't understand that goal. Help me.
So with the goal, yes, I would agree that's our goal.
As opposed to something like the goal being, let's get the best teachers in the classroom.
So for me, I feel like that's synonymous. So in our preparation program and all the practices and support methods we're providing for you, it's moving you towards certification. So that when you end the program, we can say, you can say, district can say, students can say, parents can say, that's a well-qualified teacher. Thank you.
Yeah, and I certainly hear that. I do think it's worth stressing the point that, I made in some previous panels, I made the point that I don't want to caricature the other side's position in the same way I don't want mine characterized or straw men and say, well, anybody off the street. I mean, again, nobody holds that view, or just anybody walking in off the street, and nobody holds that view. In the same way, the other side doesn't think you should have a PhD to teach first grade, right? Nobody's saying either.
Right.
But I just really do want to let's just be very cautious when we set goals, and especially if it's stated explicitly, like the goal is every teacher to have a certification, because according to your own, witness testimony here, we have uncertified teachers that are in some cases are in fact better than certified teachers. So I just want to make the point. I appreciate the
Yes, sir.
discussion.
Thank you.
All right. Members, any more questions? In there? I'm sorry. Okay. So you talked about, just help me understand sort of how this worked. You said there were 700 teachers that were seeking alternative certification. So, and you said they were hired. Were they not hired? Were they not working in a district at the time?
No, sir, they were going through our program. They were enrolled in iTeach, going through their coursework, preparing to take their test.
But you have both those that are working in a district,
Yes,
going
we
through
have-
alt cert, and those that are not currently employed.
Yes, sir. They're either enrolled or they're hired in our program. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just trying to see now, and so they're choosing to hire them, quote, as an uncertified teacher, but nothing precludes that individual from staying in your program, right?
Oh, absolutely. But what we find.
Absolutely.
No, they are absolutely, we don't know that they're hired in the DOI. We're not notified. And so
They just quit showing up
they'll write
for
me
whatever.
an email and say, I'm going to drop out of the program. I'm teaching in a DOI. I don't need certification anymore.
Okay. All right. I was just trying to figure out how that works. This is all kind of new to me today. So, and I agree. I think, and I think I said this earlier, I think you quoted it, you're going to have people all over the map, I mean, when, in what I work in every day, there's a expectation from certain licensure or certification, if you will. But that, doesn't always indicate the ability or performance of someone. However, there is a generalized recognition that if you have that, quote, designation, that you are more likely to have certain abilities than the other way. And there are outliers in all of that. And so I think that's sort of what we're getting at, and that what we want, I think, primarily are districts that hire uncertified teachers to notify parents. I think that's a pretty low bar. And then we also want them to have programs, if they are going to hire them, to help them, right, so that they become better. And on the other hand, we want the best sort of pathways, proven, evidence-based pathways to teach and train the next generation of classroom teachers. I think it's always going to be a kind of an all of the above approach. And so the other thing that I can't remember who mentioned it was that you would like to be able to do on-campus, is that what evaluations?
Yes.
And okay. So right now, everything you do, I'm guessing, has to be through sort of self-reporting by the student or the teacher. Well, it'd be your student, I guess, technically. So is that how everyone operates? Is that sort of how that works?
And right now, although we could go in and begin the 5 required observations for certification, if a teacher is not on an intern certificate, we cannot use those observations towards their state certification. And so what that does, if we did go in and work with a teacher in a DOI, we would have to do those same observations and charge and increase the cost to the candidate, because under SBEC rule, we cannot observe unless they're on an intern certificate and count those observations towards certification.
Okay, so really the uncertified lane keeps a tremendous sort of lack of oversight.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I'm pretty
That's
simple
an
about these things.
understatement,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
And I might be able to shed just a little bit of light. Any candidate that goes through an alternative certification has to do a little bit of work to then be able to put on a certificate, intern certificate. And that little bit of work involves passing your content test, doing some observation hours in a classroom, and a little bit of classroom work.
But not always, right? Say CTE,
Correct.
sort of some of that.
So the
goes beyond
the general ed population.
General- okay, that's fine. Okay.
Under TAC, there's ifs, ands, buts, exceptions for everything. But generally, there's a little bit of work that you have to do to be on a certificate, and then you can finish the rest of the work while teaching. And that is when those observations happen. With DOIs, they say, hey, we'll hire you now. And then the candidate says, well, I don't want to do a little bit of work. I want to do zero work, and I don't have to be on a certificate, so I'm not going to be. And so due to TAC code, we're not able to put them on a certificate because they haven't done the minimal amount of work. And because they're teaching and the school district is not requiring them to get certified in order to continue their employment, they never have to complete that first set of work in order to get on the certificate to then complete it. Does that clear a few things up?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. All right, I appreciate it. All right, members, any more questions? All right, thank you all very much for being here. Chair calls Holly Eaton and Dr. Andrea Chevalier. All right, I'll show you red shirt is Dr. Andrea Chevalier. On behalf of the Texas Council of Administrators of Special Education, you'll be testifying today. And I show you red shirt is Holly Eaton, Director of Professional Development and Advocacy for Texas Classroom Teachers Association. You'll be testifying. Okay. Dr. Chevalier. Or it doesn't.
She wants to start.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Eaton.
Mr. Chair, members, Holly Eaton, Texas Classroom Teachers Association. Really appreciate this invitation to testify about an issue that really goes directly to the heart of the teaching profession. I know my time is limited, so I'd like to direct you to our written comments, which are far more extensive than my comments today and include all kinds of supporting research and charts and et cetera. In preparation for this hearing, TCTA distributed an informal survey to our members asking about their experiences with uncertified teachers. I've attached a summary of their responses to my written testimony, and I strongly encourage you to look at this feedback coming directly from current Texas teachers. The major points I'd like to make are, first, the proliferation of uncertified teachers in Texas schools is detrimental to student learning, student safety, and teacher morale. And second, the state needs to invest in the teaching profession by devoting resources to teacher retention. In the member responses to our survey, the most oft expressed concern about uncertified teachers teaching students was student learning loss. It's a disservice to our students, as one member said. We are giving them an education provided by people who are not properly educated themselves on how to administer the curriculum provided. Another said, this isn't a learn-as-you-go type of career. You need as much foundational knowledge as you can get before stepping into a classroom. Our members provided a long list of areas of deficiency seen through their experiences with uncertified teachers. The list includes basic content knowledge, appropriate professional behavior, pedagogical knowledge, lesson planning and delivery, classroom management, student development, communicating with parents, and more. Our members also spoke to the issue of student safety and compliance with laws that only apply to certified teachers. As you know, and there's been some discussion about this, certified teachers can be sanctioned for inappropriate relationships with students, violation of the STAR test, if they're administering the STAR test, abandoning their contracts without good cause. Uncertified educators are not subject to such state oversight, raising concerns about student safety or other major issues. Aware that these teachers are coming in with virtually no training or experience, one member said, I really worry they will do something inappropriate or illegal without even realizing it. Another said, parents in the community deserve to know who they are and what they are teaching. It isn't fair to let the public assume their students have qualified teachers when they really don't. Attrition rates among uncertified teachers are staggeringly high. One of our members pointed out when they decide teaching isn't for them, they leave and never get certified, restarting the cycle all over again with another new uncertified teacher. And as you all know, turnover is expensive for districts. And the influx of uncertified teachers is increasing the burdens on our already overburdened teaching staff. For example, anyone administering the STAR test who's not certified is required to be supervised by someone who is. So our certified teachers are doing double duty by having to administer the STAR test and also supervise those who aren't certified. Other teachers and staff experience increased demand to provide uncertified teachers with lesson materials, modeling instruction, assistance with grading, assistance with classroom management, contacting parents, often without reduction of other duties or extra compensation. Educator certification assures us that the individual has undergone training through an approved educator preparation program and has demonstrated competency both in content and pedagogical skills. It's the state assurance to the public that these folks are competent to do this job. So when uncertified individuals are hired to teach, it's resulting in declining morale among those who underwent the process to become certified. As one member said, the profession of teaching is more than a body in the classroom and a payday. It requires dedication dedication to keep learning and growing as a professional. What we need now is to work toward getting uncertified teachers, at least those who want to be in this profession, certified. We suggest state-funded incentives for uncertified teachers to become certified, perhaps in the form of a grant program, and a state-level timeline by which they must become certified in order to remain in the classroom. Some Texas school districts are already doing this, and I've attached a list of those to my testimony, and other states have used similar strategy with great success. Over the years, Texas has chosen to address shortages by creating more avenues into the profession, many of which involve lowering entry standards or bypassing them completely, and I've attached a chart of all the routes around certification to my testimony. The recent explosion of uncertified teachers can be attributed to the District of Innovation process, and as we've heard, teacher certification is one of the topmost exemptions that DOI districts have sought, with 4.6 million students being currently impacted by that. Accordingly, we also recommend prohibiting DOI exemptions from educator certification requirements and parent notification requirements. The legislature should also authorize and require state data collection regarding school district use of uncertified teachers, including their location, the length of time they serve, and their impact on student learning. Last, the state must invest in teacher retention to reverse the shortages that are encouraging school districts to hire uncertified teachers. We need to address salaries by requiring a meaningful across-the-board pay increase for teachers and other non-administrative educators as school funding increases in a way that also accounts for inflation in future years. And we must improve working conditions, and I really appreciate some of the comments that have been made about that, because that's equally important and also may require financial investment. We should be regularly checking the school environment through the school climate survey that's already authorized in law but hasn't been administered since 2014. Research tells us that teachers who spend more time interacting with students, less time on administrative tasks, and who have some control over their schedule or assignments report better job satisfaction. Lawmakers should immediately consider legislation to support teachers' authority and autonomy in these areas, including student behavior management, protection of teacher time, and influence in local decision-making. We greatly appreciate this opportunity to testify, and we look forward to working with the committee to restore the health of the teaching profession in order to better serve our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. Dr. Chevalier.
Yes, I'm going to use my own timer to stay on track. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Andrea Chevalier. The Texas Council of Administrators of Special Education is a voluntary member-driven association for special education directors in Texas. When it comes to the challenge of retaining and recruiting special education teachers, we really point back foundationally to the special education funding gap. In 22-23, there was a $2.16 billion deficit between what districts spent on students with disabilities and the special education adjusted allotment. And as you can see from the graph, that deficit grows with special education enrollment, which is also growing in Texas. Some of the drivers of the cost of special education, we want to highlight that special education full initial evaluations are unfunded, yet mandated under federal law, and our responsibility as public school districts. And we estimate that between the 6 years that we have data for, between 2017 and 2023, that districts spent on average $135 million per year on those full initial evaluations, and all of that was unfunded specifically. As we have to increasingly use contracted evaluation staff to complete these evaluations, that cost will go up more and more because contract companies charge more for us to use their evaluators. Additionally, last session, legislation was passed, House Bill 3928, that had no fiscal impact noted, but it has had a significant fiscal impact on school districts. So we've had to increase the special education evaluations that we have done in our school districts to transition students with dyslexia on 504 plans over to special education, which increases the gap ultimately as we, again, increase our special education allotment, even though we are happy to implement that bill. Causes from the teacher and paraprofessional perspective. So we don't have caseload data at the state level, but I did run the numbers for the ratio of special education enrollment to special education teacher FTEs in Texas. And in 23-24, I found that ratio was 30.8. So 30.8 enrollment to special education FTEs. If you were to add 3 students to a special education teacher's caseload, that's estimated to add 65 hours of work per year to their plate, and at $30 an hour, that's about $2,000 of work, which could go uncompensated. Paraprofessionals are essential to special education and perfect for the special education teacher pipeline, but they are severely underpaid. In the last year we have data for 23-24, the hourly rate was on average $17.30 for a yearly average salary of $24,907. If we were to add an extra $1 an hour to the paraprofessionals' hourly rate, that could generate $1,400 a year for them, which could be a month of daycare, in my experience. So as for the impacts, obviously there's an impact to students. So when we have uncertified staff, we're very concerned about their ability to properly engage in the admission, review, and dismissal process for students, implement IEPs, maybe even knowing what an IEP is and that it exists and that it is somewhere that they need to go look at, completing paperwork, and really importantly, interacting appropriately with challenging students who have unique needs. We mitigate this liability, which is a liability of the district, but also ultimately of the state, by engaging in a lot of training and supervision for uncertified staff, and that creates a burden on our existing staff as well as the district. And we have to compete with all of the other trainings that are already required by law for us to do. Ultimately, taxpayers are on the hook for filling in the gap and kind of bridging the funding that we need to be able to do this. Oh, I still have a minute. Perfect. Okay, so some recommendations. We have talked a lot about the intensity of services model way of reforming the special education funding system. Let's do it. We could also realign our budget. So looking at the things within our budget that maybe aren't creating systemic change, maybe are really pockets of excellence, and thinking about how we could reconfigure those funds or repurpose them to direct those towards special education specifically, or other areas that are of really high need at this time. We could reduce the paperwork burden of special education teachers, provide stipends, expand financial incentives for special education certification, fund TEA to create special education certification exam modules like they do for some other subjects, increase mentor program capacity, looking at some of the retire-rehire stuff, reciprocity agreements, and funding those special education evaluations and trying to regulate contracted services costs. Almost did it.
I wouldn't cut you off.
I was trying really hard.
No, you did great. Thank you very much, both of you, for your testimony. Members, any questions for this panel? Yeah, Representative Tallarico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. Ms. Eaton, I wanted to ask about the survey because I'm looking through the survey summary and I see a long list of responses under the category of students not receiving high-quality instruction. Can you speak more about some of the things your members said about this in the survey?
Certainly. And there's if you look at the attachment, there's a list, first of all, of kind of all the single line areas of deficiency, but then I kind of categorized it according to what the quotes or the responses were speaking to. And so, like I said, the concern about the lack of high-quality instruction was the oft most expressed concern by our members. And just a couple of things that kind of jumped out at me. One member said, for example, that other teachers, meaning the existing staff, are asked repeatedly to provide instructional support, curriculum, and other materials. They've also been asked to provide lesson plans. And this is unfortunate as the certified teachers are carrying their load and the uncertified teachers' load without acknowledgement or compensation. And what that does is it undermines the idea of team and support and causes rifts in the relationships of the teaching staff. Another one commented, it adds stress to teachers who are already at a breaking point and wanting to leave the profession. So I think one of the points there was just giving you all a view from the ground of the sort of the burdens that are being placed on our existing personnel to deal with this influx of uncertified teachers and the fact that it may in fact make teacher attrition worse because the certified teachers are saying, I'm done, I can't continue to do this. So that's an aspect that I don't know that's been necessarily discussed too much today.
Okay. I also see a long list of responses under the category of lowered standards across the board. What did your, can you help us understand what you're hearing on that front?
So, yeah, that was another interesting sort of expression from our members. One person said, for example, when expectations are lowered for some, there's an unintentional lowering of expectations for all, and that putting untrained and inadequately prepared people in the classroom often results in increased student academic and behavioral challenges across the whole campus. So this dynamic is not just impacting the uncertified teachers classroom, it is impacting the entire school. It's actually a school-wide impact. Another talked about not serving the students well. I mean, that's kind of the main sentiment that I think our folks were expressing is it's not fair to the students. They're already struggling to recover from COVID, from the learning gaps or loss that occurred there, and this is just making it worse. So that was really kind of the main sentiment under that, the lowering of standards overall.
Okay. Last question. You mentioned in your testimony that teacher turnover is expensive.
Yes.
For school districts. Can you elaborate what you mean by that? And
I know there was a prior witness that talked about this too and gave some figures. The figures I have are from a 2023 study of Texas that the cost of replacing each teacher who leaves exceeds $10,800 in a rural district, $13,200 in a suburban district, and $25,200 in an urban district. So that's what we mean when we say turnover is costly for school districts.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Chairman Dutton.
Thank you. But Holly, I was looking at the survey too, and I guess the prior panel sort of led me to believe that somehow or another we didn't really know who the uncertified teachers were, but the survey indicates just the opposite.
Well, I think if you're the one assigned to work with the uncertified teacher, that's how you know.
Okay, so so they.
So it may not be that every teacher in the school knows, but if you're the one working with the uncertified teacher.
Oh, I see. And so you would talk in the survey, you spoke to those particular teachers.
We asked our members who responded to the survey, first of all, whether they were certified or not. And we have the graphs showing the percentage that were or weren't. Of course, the majority of them were. And we asked what their experiences were in working with uncertified teachers. So these are personal responses.
Right. And finally, what do you suggest we do to increase the number of certified teachers?
Well, I think we have to make the profession more attractive, and the ways that we recommend doing that are by looking at teacher compensation and working conditions, namely addressing teacher retention, because if we get new folks in, if they're not going to stay, what's the point? It's just churn, and churn has been documented in evidence to support the fact that it's bad for stability of the workforce. It has a negative impact on student learning. It's not a healthy profession when that kind of symptom emerges. So those are the kinds of things we recommend doing.
Well, because sometimes we hear people come up and say, well, it's not about the money. It's about something else. It's about working conditions. It's about this or that. And
Well, I would say both and.
Okay.
Which I know is, it's a bigger thing to take on, but yes,
right.
Both and.
And making making school teaching more attractive by doing all these things, you're suggesting that would attract more certified teachers.
Because we know from research that those facets of the job are the things that are driving teachers out. And those also are the facets that are giving potential teachers pause about entering the profession.
But I thought most of the teachers that were leaving were the uncertified teachers.
No. I mean, they have a high attrition rate.
That's what I mean,
There's
yeah.
plenty of certified teachers leaving too.
Okay, I'll be glad to
Okay.
talk to you about it because I think we can do something.
Members, any more questions? Okay. Dr. Chevalier, I spoke with a superintendent of a pretty large school district last week, and mentioned to me that he had 300, about to start school, had 300 openings for special education teachers. It's a big district, but still, it's a stagger. I nearly ran off the road. I was not texting and drive. I was talking on the phone. I pulled over. So, you know, he and I, we had about a 30-minute discussion about, you know, the pipeline of how we do that. And I think you mentioned, you know, in your testimony some key things. But just, would you mind sharing with the committee how we, obviously we need to do more for special education teachers that are there now, but, you know, that is a true calling. And he mentioned the special ed areas where he was really in the most, you know, stressed and under, you know, short-staffed, for lack of a better term. So what are some things that you think we can do in the, whether it be at the ed prep level or what have you, that would benefit and help us have access to more highly trained special education teachers?
There's a few things. So SBEC has changed. They're launching some new certifications, and one of those is a combined certification for special education, EC through 6, and the STR. So they'll still have to take multiple exams, but at least it's one certification, and those people who are going in to the elementary level will have both. So districts will be able to potentially tap those individuals for those special education positions. One thing that we do run into in districts is asking someone to serve in a special education position and them not wanting to. So we also need to make sure that the caseload is low enough and that there's enough paraprofessional support and district support and training to be able to make that attractive as well. Additionally, one of the things that I mentioned, so TEA has some modules online that are free to existing teachers, and those help prepare teachers to take the bilingual certification exam, and then there's another one as well. Can't remember what the other one is, but it's, for ESL. So if we could do something similar for special education, that would help take the load off of some of our districts that don't have the resources. Like I know Katy ISD has created their own modules to help existing teachers get special education certification and add that, but other districts don't have that capacity. So doing something like that would help us get some of the teachers that we already have into that, be able to fill those positions as well. And then we also find that paraprofessionals are being hired by places who can offer them a higher hourly rate. So like Buc-ee's and Amazon and Costco, paraprofessionals are leaving to go work for those employers. So if we can keep them in the district and then get them into Grow Your Own programs, that would help as well.
Okay. So, thank you. I mean, that's, you have to look at sort of immediate needs, and then at some point you have to fix the system, right? You have to create more. So whether or not it's, high quality ed prep programs where folks really are, whether it's a residency or what have you, where they're taught, early on, some of the specialties of, special education. You mentioned, so I think you mentioned, just so I understand, because I'm thinking about things we can do. So this is a really broad question, but I know there's federal requirements, and when I spoke to some of your colleagues at your event that you had, we talked about, documentation and the things that federal law requires, but it's hard for teachers to do, right? And funding, I agree with you 100%. Okay, but what are some things the state of Texas does that we could reform, that could make it a better environment for our special education teachers to work in?
There's two sides to that, I think. So on one hand, if the caseload is lower, then the paperwork requirements aren't as big of a deal. Yeah. When the caseload is too high, then you're spending all your time doing paperwork instead of interacting with students and providing the services. So TEA also publishes a side-by-side of the rules and regulations, so it has IDEA, state law, and our state regulations, and I think that that would be a place to look to see what are we doing that's above and beyond, but I would also be cautious with that because a lot of those rules and laws have been put into place to make sure that we're in compliance with federal law and to meet the needs of certain groups that have come forward and said, hey, this thing's happening that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that needs to be a balanced conversation, and a lot of care needs to be put into that. But I do think that it's worth looking at. I can't say off the top of my head what.
No, I'm not asking you to do
yeah.
that. I couldn't tell you one right now personally. So, but I appreciate it. I want to have that conversation, about what we might be able to do. But we need people in the room that understand it, and so appreciate you helping us with that as we move forward. Members, any other questions for this panel? All right, we really appreciate y'all being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, members, that concludes testimony on charge number 3. We'll move to charge number 4. Early literacy and numeracy outcomes. Evaluate opportunities to improve students' foundational early literacy and numeracy outcomes in pre-kindergarten through the 3rd grade. Study best practices for identifying students requiring reading and math intervention and providing evidence-based intervention strategies. Recommend changes and evaluate investments to increase the number of students achieving reading and math proficiency by the end of 3rd grade. Chair calls Shannon Trejo. Oh, you're on the next panel. Oh, sorry.
I'm happy for you to stay with me.
But you can stay up there, Ms. Frazier, if you want to. Yeah. All right. I show you registered as Shannon Trejo, Deputy Commissioner for School Programs for TEA. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Buckley, esteemed members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you on early literacy and numeracy today. My name is Shannon Trejo, and I recently joined TEA as the Deputy Commissioner of School Programs. I'm transitioning actually from 30 years in the public school setting, where I had the opportunity to begin my career as a bilingual teacher, principal of a dual language campus, serve in a variety of central office roles, and many of the topics that we're going to be discussing today were areas that I personally participated in and supported throughout my career in Texas, only in Texas, because it's the best state to be in. If you look at slide 2, I'm hoping you have the presentation in front of you. No. It's on the Dropbox. And sharing. I thought we had printed copies in front. Let me continue so we can save your time, if that's okay. In order to evaluate opportunities for improvement, you will see soon in the slide you're about to have in front of you that we need to understand what data are available to indicate current proficiency. That is it. Thank you. So, sliding over to slide 2, again, we need to understand what data are available to indicate current proficiency rates and trajectory towards success on grade level 3rd grade. The bar graph provided shows beginning of year kindergarten readiness, particularly in literacy measures that are authorized in statute. And 3rd grade meets grade level proficiency for both STAR reading and math over a 3-year period. The data indicate in kinder readiness year-over-year growth with a 7 percentage point gain, while 3rd grade outcomes indicate declines in reading and inconsistent outcomes in math year-over-year. It is important to note that the agency does not have direct access to complete data to effectively have insight into projected proficiency between kindergarten and 3rd grade. Slide 3 talks about relevant legislation that I think many of you have played a part in establishing foundational requirements, policy, and funding that support trajectory towards on-grade level proficiency in 3rd grade. These key legislations have established early reading assessments, enhanced statewide pre-K programs, improved teacher training, provided targeted math education, and invested in curriculum transparency and high-quality instruction materials,
All of these are contributing to supporting districts. In slide 3, I want to talk about how these previously mentioned bills are directly supporting a research-based component necessary to increase achievement. These 5 components listed on slide 4, are best practices currently being implemented in the field, as well as I want to talk a little bit about considerations for the committee to better align efforts towards on-grade level proficiency. The first one you've already heard testimony on regarding House Bill 1605 and instructional materials. The second one being Tier 1 teaching. How are we ensuring that the best instructional delivery is happening? The next one being aligned diagnostics. How are we progress monitoring students and helping teachers use that data to actually impact instructional decisions? The next one being intervention. How are we helping students get what they need when they don't get it the first time? And then, of course, access to foundational literacy and foundational academics early on. So in slide 5, I'm going to start with effective Tier 1 instructional materials. And I know you have seen this graphic before, but it does warrant additional visual that outlines the key evidence for effective reading language arts curriculum. It really highlights the role of decoding as a foundation for reading proficiency. In grades K through 2, direct daily instruction in phonics, phonemic awareness, and fluency is crucial for developing automaticity and prosody in reading. I know this from my role in Dallas ISD, where we worked with teachers on a consistent basis to increase the quality and their depth of understanding and transference into taking those materials and making it happen for kids in the classroom. Really important. This has to be accompanied by understanding complex vocabulary and engaging in coherent knowledge-building curriculum. Along with evidence-based writing, this will prepare students for success in 3rd grade and beyond. We know that from the research. The next slide outlines effective Tier 1 instruction materials in early math. We know that these instruction materials must develop mathematical proficiency through a combination of automaticity and fluency with conceptual understanding and application. This is the ability to quickly and accurately recall math facts and execute procedures with ease while being able to understand and apply math concepts, operations, and relationships. House Bill 1605 ensures that districts have resources to be able to purchase high-quality instructional materials, which are crucial for achieving this and protecting teacher time so that they can go in and utilize these materials effectively in the classroom. The next component I want to talk about is well-trained teachers. I feel like we've been talking about that all day, but I do want to remind you of statute around reading and math academies. Texas Reading and Math Academy support training for increased content knowledge for teachers, which we all recognize is very, very important. I know it's been mentioned you may not need a PhD to teach 1st grade, but I can guarantee you need some depth of knowledge and understanding how foundational literacy and numeracy work in order to make sure that 1st graders are on level. More than 141,000 educators have participated in research-based professional learning focused on the science of teaching reading, including phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, handwriting, decoding, and reading fluency, in order to meet the deadline for all K through 3 teachers and elementary principals to be trained. Funding has supported the completion of this training, and some of the considerations we would like for you to think about is the need to shift attention to the transference of this training into the actual classroom application and implementation so that highly trained teachers are using high-quality instructional materials to ensure students can read. The math academies provide targeted training to educators in effective and systematic instructional practices in mathematics. These academies are designed to build teacher capacity, particularly in the areas of problem solving, place value, number operations, and fractions. Overall, the academies aim to provide comprehensive support and training for teachers, equipping them with the tools and strategies needed to improve student outcomes. As mathematics continues to become a central focus, especially in light of the recent declines in math performance, we hope that you will consider the need to fund math academies as an optional training that will be a necessity. We are seeing an increase in demand as of this past summer, actually, where districts are recognizing the value of the math academies, and we want to make sure that we can meet that demand. In addition, we want to talk about well-supported teachers in schools. We've talked about educator certification, but we also want to couple that with instructional leaders who can support these teachers in a variety of ways. High-quality instructional materials have to be placed in the hands of highly qualified teachers who are supported by instructional leaders. Investments in grant programming such as the Texas Instructional Leadership Program and the Strong Foundations Planning and Implementation Program build capacity for a variety of instructional leaders. And remember, instructional leaders can come in a variety of packages. It doesn't just have to be a school principal or a leader of principals. Just as the teacher is the heart of the classroom, the principal is the heart of the school. And support from leadership through coaching, observation and feedback, and strong strategic programming can make all the difference in capitalizing on our greatest asset, which is skilled teachers. More than 300 districts have opted into Strong Foundations programming, and more than 150 districts have opted into Texas Instructional Leadership Programming. On the next slide, I want to talk about component 3, which is aligned foundational diagnostics. These actually ensure that students are developing in early literacy and numeracy, and that educators have access to data to adjust instruction based on this progress. On the right side of the slide, you can see through statutory authority, we have insight into how we are performing as a state when it comes to literacy, especially in pre-K, K, and third grade. I know from my own experience that districts monitor student progress in both reading and math in all early grades. However, as a state, we do not have insight into that information to inform policy, funding, and differentiated supports. Many of the key ingredients highlighted on the left for effective diagnostics are already in play, but the gaps in data attainment for areas like vocabulary and mathematics proficiency could be addressed statutorily to help schools improve overall math proficiency. Component 4 relies on effective intervention structures. Tier 1 instruction has to be coupled with safety nets to support students who need supplemental help. This includes availability of supports like scheduled time in the school day, especially for early learners, specialized teaching staff like dyslexia trained interventionists who can go in and support students who are behind in their reading skill set, and key curricular supports to take additional action and fill gaps in early learning to maintain that trajectory to third grade proficiency. We know that there are declines in reading and inconsistent outcomes in mathematics for third grade, which is why we've got to have better insight into what's happening in the classroom and how are we ensuring that from the beginning of K, when we know readiness is happening, and the end of third grade when we're measuring on STAR, how do we make sure that policy funding and effective supports are being put into play to get kids on track in third grade? The last component is effective early learning access. I, for one, coming out of Dallas ISD, am a huge proponent of ensuring that students have access to high-quality early learning programs for pre-K3 and pre-K4. You'll note that this access to pre-K opportunities continues to show promise, with 144,000 students participating in 3- and 4-year-old program offerings, resulting in 60% of students with at least 50% attendance meeting kinder readiness standards. We do know that being in pre-K means you're going to be further ahead in kinder readiness than if you had not attended pre-K. That concludes my presentation.
All right, members, any questions? We'll start with Chair Dutton.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to look at what other states are doing in terms of early childhood readiness?
Absolutely. There have been lots of models actually shared across the nation, particularly related to the science of teaching reading certification,
Right.
Reading academies that are requiring training for teachers, especially in the early grades, to ensure that high quality instruction is happening for foundational literacy practices.
And when, I don't know if you had a chance to look at Mississippi, for example, and how they're revolutionizing their education system, but they've passed a bill, as I understand it, that would require a mandatory passage of third grade before you can leave third grade. Have you seen that?
I'm aware of that particular.
Well,
path.
I wonder, you know, we talked about that when we found that out, and we were looking at all the different states. That seemed to be the one that was most dramatic in terms of its approach. But it's working in Mississippi, which I found amazing. But they didn't just put up the bar.
Right.
They also created all the resources there to address students' needs so that they could actually be reading on third grade level.
Correct.
Which became, you know, one of the centerpieces of the legislation we had here was trying to ensure that every student who leaves third grade was at least reading on third grade level. Because what we found is that if they aren't reading on third grade level, then they're not learning on fourth and fifth and sixth grade level.
That's right.
Could you just speak to that a little bit?
I think in the past, there was some statutory requirements around what we called placement committees that helped ensure that if students were not passing particular state exams, that there was consideration around retention for those particular students. As a district staff person at that time, I did see the merit in understanding why students were not on grade level at that point, but also respected the research around the impact that retention can have on potential on-time graduation with cohort. So I do think it's warrants additional research of the Mississippi efforts to better understand if you are going to consider something like that, what are the resources that we're putting in place to ensure that if a decision like that is made, every effort has been exhausted to ensure that students are meeting that proficiency level by the time they hit third grade.
And maybe you can help me understand something. I had a person come to me and say, on the one hand, Texas's students in third grade are not less than half of them are proficient on third grade reading. But then when you look at graduation rates, we have a 86% graduation rate. They said, well, how's that happening? I said, I don't know. Can you respond to that at all?
I think it's like acknowledge the discrepancy that could be there. I do think in looking at third grade reading scores, you're a long way from graduation. We have a lot of talented teachers and a lot of talented interventionists that work very, very hard to get kiddos back on track and moving in the right direction. And some of the scores, even in eighth grade reading, show tremendous amount of gains as they move through middle school, gain a lot in that eighth grade center, and then move on into high school. So could there be a correlation that we could strengthen and ensure that third grade proficiency matches that research that says you're 4 times more likely to graduate high school if you're on the grade level in third grade? Yes. But definitively, I think we've got a lot of hardworking people that are ensuring that kiddos are getting what they need.
Because it almost looks like we're doing better with kids as they move through the system. And there are a lot of data that indicates that that's simply not generally the case now. It may be some exceptions to that, but generally that's not the case. But when you look at the graduation rate and you look at the third grade reading scores, you're almost convinced that must be happening.
I think it's possible. I think the third grade reading scores are definitively the area of concentration that we need to work on, and you don't get to that third grade reading outcome without backing up into K through 2. And as I stated before, like it's difficult sometimes to get insight into what are the policy funding and differentiated supports that need to happen if we don't have the data to inform what those might be.
And certainly identifying those things that are causing children not to read on third grade level. For example, identifying dyslexia reading problems early and all the other things associated with that are causing students not to read. But the identification early and trying to provide some help with what's going on with him is also a big part of has to be a big part of the solution.
Agreed.
And so I'm still toying with this idea about whether or not we ought to have an absolute bar to leaving third grade without being able to read on third grade level. And I'm not, Mr. Chairman, I'm not convinced one way or the other yet, but I do know we got to look at doing something, because I understand our third grade reading scores are down in the maybe high 30%, somewhere along in there, I believe.
We're at 46.
46, is that
Yes,
what it
sir.
was? Okay. Yeah, that's not good. That doesn't portend that we'll have successful children in college and career readiness. That doesn't bode well for Texas. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, Chairman Dutton, I've looked at their program. They refer to it as the Mississippi Miracle in some instances, but I believe it is, as Ms. Trio has outlined, it begins way before they get there. And hopefully we're going to kind of unearth some of that today, but that is it's an interesting look at it, and there's a whole lot more to it than simple retention in third grade or what have you. But appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's worthy for us to think about. Any more questions? Yeah, Representative Hinojosa.
So during our, not public education committee, but the special committee that was convened last year on public education, we heard testimony that the STAR test is not testing grade level reading, but is through some algorithm is predicting college readiness. If you're at a certain level on third, then that is supposed to translate into being on track to reach some college readiness. It was perplexing to myself and others on the committee at the time. I think we need to acknowledge that there are a lot of questions about whether the way our accountability system and usage of STAR is measuring what people expect it would measure. I don't understand how you take a kid in third grade and understand based on a test in math or reading how that correlates to whether that kid is college ready if it's not about reading on grade level. But we were specifically told, I can't remember who was before us from TEA, that it was not about on grade reading level. The other thing that I think is important to acknowledge is that, and I don't know what these scores are these scores meeting or are they approaching?
These are meets.
Okay,
scores
right.
presented here.
But so
That's
in the
correct.
state of Texas, we acknowledge approaching as passage.
Passing,
And I
that's
think it's
correct.
important if we're going to do that, and if we're going to say this is the standard, then we probably should make graphs like this that make it look like we're not, the kids aren't meeting the passing mark. We didn't used to have an approaching. We've decided to divide those up as opposed to having passing, not passing. So now that we have this other category, and if we're going to recognize it, the passing standard, I think that it would make sense for us to talk about it in that way. The STAR test also in our accountability system is not stagnant. It moves, and the way we grade moves. And so it's hard for me, at least as a policymaker, to understand progress with the STAR over years because of changes. It's also hard for me to understand how we compare to other states. The only thing I know to look at are the NAEP scores. And now I don't claim to be an expert on this either, but I don't know how else to compare state to state other than looking at NAEP. And I know that NAEP is not testing all kids, but when I look at NAEP, I see that we are scores in math and reading, and maybe there's been a change in the NAEP scores in the NAEP testing, so somebody needs to tell me, but we seem to be decreasing. Our scores seem to be decreasing, not dramatically, little by little, and reading is harder than math. Again, we were rocking it in 2011 in math in 8th grade, and something's changing. So I say all that as a premise to, we focus so much on assessment and technology lately in the name of innovation. And it really concerns me that when we're talking about 3rd graders and younger, that we rely so heavily on assessment and technology for these littles. We heard from our commissioner at the beginning of the last year that we wanted to try to keep the littles off of technology. As a mother, I think that makes sense just from my own experience. If we think that relationship between a teacher and kids is important, I think we need to acknowledge that's the best way kids learn is from a professional. And I relate a story of my own son who tried to run away from school in 2nd grade because of STAR test preparation. There's a lot of pressure put on these kids. So I don't have evidence that our reliance and that our heavier reliance on testing and technology is resulting in better outcomes. I don't see it in NAEP. If you look at, since the commissioner who is a proponent of testing and technology has been here, I don't see improvement in comparison to other states. In NAEP scores or in comparison to ourselves, we're decreasing in performance. So I just want to put that out there because for me, it's not a given that this is the way to better results for our kids. And I do know that a lot of our kids are experiencing mental health issues post-pandemic. Again, I've mentioned my own son. I had one son who didn't have a problem with STAR testing. It didn't affect him. But I had another son for whom it was a problem, and maybe it was what they were doing at his school. It was a small Title I school. Maybe that was it. So I would just like us to acknowledge that not all of us think this is the right direction to go when it comes to early childhood. And if you have anything to say that, any
Sure.
feedback, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I do want to just thank you for that. I appreciate that as a mom as well. And again, as an educator for 30 years who taught at the elementary level and worked with middle schoolers as a principal, I hear you. And my heart is with those thoughts and desires as well. I firmly believe, like, kids interacting with teachers in hands-on ways in the early learning environment is what gets us to where we need to be. I do believe in the training for teachers and the transference of that depth of knowledge into the classroom in exciting ways with great manipulatives, alphabet arcs, really decodable text that helps kids practice what it is that they're learning in the classroom, and then couple that with highly trained reading interventionists who understand dyslexia and have had up to COUT type therapy training to be able to help students get back on track. Like, that is the bread and butter of early learning. So highly trained teachers, great instructional materials that are hands-on, interactive, face-to-face, working with their hands, I think is definitively the way to go. I also think supporting leaders who are going into the classrooms, that they know what they're looking at and can give good feedback to teachers, help them understand by coaching. It's not evaluation. It is not a focus on a STAR outcome in the early grades. It's about, are we providing high quality teaching and are kids progressing? And those types of observations can also be progress monitoring, right? In the moment, checks for understanding, ensuring that kids are grasping those phonetic concepts, those numeracy concepts are really, really important. So I would say, like, we are definitely on the same page in terms of what are the thoughts around what impacts early learners and the best pathway to get them on grade level when it comes to 3rd grade proficiency. We want kids to be successful at 3rd grade because we know that the research tells us they can be more successful beyond 3rd grade if they're ready to go by the time they hit that door. I think that's probably where the last one being just access. Like, what are we doing to ensure that we're recruiting and marketing and giving every available opportunity to students who need to be able to grab a hold of high quality pre-K opportunities as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, and how much that enhances their ability to walk into a kindergarten classroom and feel confident and feel smart and feel like they can take on the world, I think is something we need to continue to focus on. So I appreciate your comments, and those would be my responses. Thank you.
All right. Members, any more questions for Ms. Trejo? Okay. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.